Friends, as we continue our discussion about the internal Cold War of the Muslim world, we arrive at the year 1980, the moment when a local conflict transformed into a regional turning point. On 22 September 1980, Iraq launched a large-scale attack across the border into Iran's oil-rich province of Khuzestan. Saddam Hussein believed the timing was perfect. Iran had just undergone a revolution, its military command structure was shaken, and its leadership was still busy consolidating power inside the country. From Baghdad's perspective, Iran appeared vulnerable. Ayatollah Khomeini immediately reached out to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and demanded condemnation of the invasion. However, no clear collective denunciation came from the organization. For Iran, this silence carried meaning. Tehran interpreted it as proof that political alliances and strategic interests were stronger than religious solidarity. Khuzestan was not just another border province. It was among the most valuable territories in Iran because of its immense oil reserves. Iraqi forces crossed the frontier and in only a few days captured several strategic locations. The city of Khorramshahr, one of the most important oil-linked ports, fell quickly. The Iranian army at that time was very different from the powerful military that had existed under the Shah. Only months earlier, that army had been loyal to the monarchy and had spent years suppressing revolutionary groups. After the revolution, purges, distrust, and reorganization had weakened command cohesion. As a result, during the opening phase of the war, Iranian forces were unable to mount a strong defense. Within days, Iraq had occupied nearly 25,000 square kilometers of Iranian territory. After 6 days of fighting, the United Nations Security Council began pressuring both sides toward a ceasefire. Iraq agreed in principle because an immediate halt would have frozen its gains. Saddam Hussein announced willingness to stop fighting, but insisted on one condition: the territories captured by Iraqi forces should be formally recognized as Iraqi-controlled areas. Iran could not accept this. The revolution was new, legitimacy fragile, and any acceptance of lost land would have been seen as proof that the revolutionary leadership had failed to defend national sovereignty. Therefore, Tehran rejected the proposal. Although Iran's military strength had declined, the country possessed another force that did not exist in the same way in neighboring states: a deep sense of historical national identity. For centuries, Persian identity had survived invasions, dynastic changes, and ideological shifts. Many Iranians disagreed with Khomeini politically, yet the foreign invasion transformed public sentiment. It unified factions that had recently been enemies. To defend the homeland, they rallied behind the only leadership capable of organizing resistance. Large numbers of volunteers were recruited to support the army. They received basic training and were organized into formations symbolically called Caravans of Karbala. The name carried emotional meaning because Karbala lies in Iraq and evokes sacrifice in Islamic memory. The narrative framed the war not only as defensive territory, but as a sacred struggle against an oppressive ruler. Religious scholars accompanied fighters to the front lines, sometimes even carrying weapons themselves. They delivered speeches about martyrdom, sacrifice, and historical battles, turning morale into a powerful strategic resource. This ideological mobilization became one of the defining characteristics of Iran's war effort. Meanwhile, Iraq was not alone. Saudi Arabia and the United States indirectly supported Baghdad. Advanced satellite mapping technology allowed the United States to obtain high-resolution imagery of Iranian troop positions. This intelligence was shared with Saudi Arabia, and Washington knew that Riyadh in turn passed it to Iraq. The arrangement was unofficial, yet understood. Without direct military confrontation, it significantly improved Iraqi battlefield awareness. However, international relations were complicated. On 26 January 1981, shortly after Ronald Reagan took office as U.S. president, a secret diplomatic arrangement led to the release of American embassy personnel who had been held in Tehran for 444 days. They were transferred through Algeria and returned home. This event created a brief moment suggesting potential improvement between Washington and Tehran. but the United States still did not pressure Iraq to withdraw from Iranian territory. The war continued. As fighting persisted, global oil prices rose dramatically. A barrel that had once sold for only a few dollars climbed to around $28. Oil exporting states, particularly Saudi Arabia, experienced enormous revenue growth. The economic consequences of the war began reshaping regional politics as much as military operations. In 1982, another event shifted the propaganda battle. The Saudi king died, and Crown Prince Fahd assumed the throne. His personal lifestyle contrasted sharply with previous rulers. Stories about luxury residences, parties, and indulgence circulated widely. Iranian media amplified these narratives to portray Saudi leadership as morally corrupt and unworthy of religious authority. Whether exaggerated or accurate, the messaging proved effective in ideological competition. During the same period, thousands of Iranian pilgrims traveled for Hajj. Saudi authorities became suspicious that political literature was being distributed among international pilgrims. Security inspections increased, pamphlets were confiscated, and at least one Iranian individual was arrested in Medina for performing rituals not permitted by local regulations. Each incident deepened mistrust between the two states. What began as geopolitical rivalry increasingly took on religious symbolism, though the underlying struggle remained one of power and influence rather than theology. By 1982, Iraq still held Khorramshahr, Abadan, and control over sections of the Shatt al-Arab waterway. Iraq initially maintained the upper hand, but the situation changed dramatically. Iranian forces reorganized and launched counteroffensives. By 24 May 1982, they pushed Iraqi troops back to the pre-war borders and regained lost cities. Saddam Hussein's original objective, destabilizing Iran or holding territory, was slipping away. At the same time, Iraq faced growing financial pressure. Massive loans from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia financed the war effort, and repayment loomed. Economic strain combined with battlefield stalemate pushed Baghdad towards seeking a ceasefire. Saddam Hussein indicated readiness for negotiations, yet now Iran rejected the idea. Iran insisted no truce would be accepted while Saddam remained in power. For Khomeini, the war had unified society, strengthened revolutionary legitimacy, and transformed him into a national defender. Ending it without decisive political change in Baghdad seemed unacceptable. Thus, the positions reversed. Iraq wanted peace, Iran wanted continuation until regime change in Baghdad. The conflict entered a prolonged phase where neither side could achieve total victory, yet neither would compromise. Beneath this struggle existed another actor, a third party whose interests favored continuation of hostilities. The methods used by that actor would later become a major topic of debate and controversy. So the war that began as a rapid invasion evolved into a drawn-out confrontation shaping regional politics, economics, and identity. Oil markets shifted, alliances hardened, propaganda intensified, and internal unity in both countries became tied to the battlefield. What appeared initially as a short border war became one of the longest conventional conflicts of the 20th century, setting patterns whose effects would influence the Middle East for decades to come. This is where we pause before moving forward into the next phase of the story, where external involvement, covert strategies, and unexpected calculations would further complicate the conflict and redefine the balance of power across the region.